reach out to me like, what should I? Oh, um, I mean, I don't know. I was applying, quite honestly, I was applying to so much shit when I applied to Techstars. I almost had even forgotten that I had applied to Techstars because I just applied to so many things. I was like, I don't even know I'm applying to everything. And and but it does make a difference too, particularly with Techstars. I don't know with other things. Having a little bit of a relationship with the managing director and the team, I think helps because they're familiar with you. Because I know I met Tim when he hadn't even announced yet. I was at ATV. I was talking to Allie Merritt, and he hadn't even announced yet that he had made that he had gotten the managing director thing. So I met him that day that he was talking to her. So we kind of like we met that day. And so we had that connection a little bit. So he kind of already knew me a little bit. So I think that does make a little bit of a difference, maybe. It doesn't hurt. And then I think really, like you said, crafting the story about what the problem is, that you understand it, and that you have a solution that you understand and that can execute, that can solve this. And like pre-revenue is totally like, yeah, that's not a problem at all. Most everyone in my Techstars program was pre-revenue.
Yeah.
So that's fine. So I will say with Techstars, like you said, Kristen, they focus so much on the demo day. We spent so much time doing the demo day prep. Like I feel like, and I kind of was like, okay, we must be doing this because we're going to have so many investors that are going to be so interested in us, and it's going to be like just a springboard into investment. And that didn't happen at all. I didn't have one outreach period after demo day from investors. And I think that is the one thing. And I told them this too in like our follow-up stuff. I don't feel like we did very much time really prepping for investors and raising a fund, raising your round. We just didn't really spend that much time on it, and I wish that we had, because I'm really behind.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the managing director piece, because the person who's ultimately running the program is going to have the ultimate say on what they want those portfolio companies to look like. So for Tamara's class, I was one of the mentors, and so we went in for like a mentor day, and I got to sit down with every single company, and I was walking in being like, they're going to have completed products, revenue, like all this traction because of other Techstars demo days that I had attended. When I walked in, there were a lot of non-technical founders who had their clickable prototypes that were building their first iteration product, and were typically a little bit earlier stage than normal. And that was because of Tim and the team, and their sponsor too plays a big role. So their sponsor in this case is Cox. Cox is very heavily invested into Atlanta. So they wanted Atlanta-based companies, and they wanted diversity. So based on those two goals, that's going to shape who they're choosing to fill those slots, right? So it's all dependent on managing director, the team, the sponsor, and what they're trying to showcase from that. And so that's understanding what they need, and then finding out if that's a good match for you and how to tweak your story based on that. The other great thing too, because I'm not familiar with the other program that you were talking about, is talking to founders who have gone through it and finding out their experience, right? So hearing from Tamara on her experience is super valuable. And I would talk to founders who've gone through the program, because a couple things can come through. One, you can get, a good understanding about what it's like, what you're going to get out of it, what the workload's like, what the mentorship like, what that expectation is post. And you can also perhaps get a introduction to the team. Someone can talk your name, like, oh, did you hear about this one company? They're really badass. Like, having people speak your name in rooms that you're not in is big, and that comes into networking too. And this by the way, is the same for investors too. Like, it's all relationship based, and investors will say like, oh, this makes me upset. But investors will always say, like, I'll invest an idea in a napkin. But like when you actually look at where they're writing the checks, it's not. But here's the thing, they want to get to know you. when your idea is on a napkin, because they want to see how you are going to progress through the journey of being a founder. So if you meet someone, you're like, I have this idea, and then you go back to them 6 months later and it's like, I did customer discovery and I pivot. And then you go back to them 6 months later and been like, I got my product in market and this is how many users I have. They're like, wow, she came that far by herself all that time. I've watched that journey. I know that she's a badass and works through it and has that grit and determination. They would be great for this community. They would come in and they would help too. Because it's also like when you get groups of people together, it's how they interact with one another and how they're also pushing them too, right? So when you're choosing groups and choosing cohorts and choosing portfolio companies, you want to find some that are complementary and then founders that are going to drive motivation for other ones, right? So there's a lot of different factors which makes it difficult, but it's like stick to yourself, I would say. Don't try to change yourself to fit the program. Make sure the program fits you. That's probably my biggest advice for that. Yeah. Anyone else have any kind of feedback or like questions about how to submit your information, the interview process? What other questions are coming through? One trick that I like, any kind of application I'm ever doing, I'll copy all of the questions into a Word doc, and that will be my working document. So I bring other people into that mix, right? It's like, okay, these are my questions. Can you read this for me and make sure that it's hitting right? So going through the application process with other founders and coaches is really helpful. So that way you make sure that what you're trying to articulate is coming through. Because a lot of times what's most difficult about how we describe our businesses is that we are so involved in it in the day to day, the ins and outs, all the conversations we have, like everything plays into the strength that we feel about our business model, what we're doing. And you have to realize that everyone that you're talking to isn't there with you. And so the difficult part is picking out the things that we think are going to resonate with other people that they're going to understand. And it ends up being a complete back and forth and like a massage almost, where you're just like really playing around with different things and testing things out. So I always say the more you can get out and network and talk about your business, talk about your idea, talk about the direction, talk about the good things, the bad things, like everything you're going through with other people to see how they're responding to you. Right? Like I'll talk to people about tech AF and they'll be like, yeah, no code. And I'm like, okay, you don't get it. Like this isn't no code. This isn't what we do. Maybe I should describe that differently. It's just, it's the realities of it. It's so hard because we're so close. And so that's why it's just really helpful to have someone else go through it too. And I will tell you, because I know many of us are guilty of this, is we will not, especially as women, we will not boost ourselves up enough. And so a lot of times I'll get some applications back from some founders and they'll be like, can you review this? And I'm like, you're not showcasing your badassery at all. Like you're totally downplaying all of the work that you've done. And we tend to do that because we're looking externally to what everyone else is doing and not sticking to what our own experience is. So Rhiannon, when you're talking about your background, your knowledge of the space and this pivot into going, directly to the production companies, like that's a story that you're telling and that's very unique to you. And you don't shy away from that work, right? Like doing customer discovery and being so okay with what we're building to be able to pivot, make changes, adapt. That's the key. It's not, I've got this shiny product in market and I've got it on the app store. Like if no one's using that product, if you're not actually solving a problem, and if you're actually not driving revenue, that means diddly squat. I want to know more that you've done the work, you've had the conversations, you've talked to people you don't know, and you validated that you're not the only one who needs this. You're not the only one who's running into this problem, and that nothing out there is quite like what you're putting together. That's what I want to know. And a lot of times, because we hear pitches, because we see founders, because we go to these demo days, it's really easy to just assume like, oh, this is the shiny thing, but you don't really know what that story was, right? So stick to your own story, stick to what you've actually accomplished, and like really own that, I would say. Like, don't try to make yourself seem like anything you're not, because at the end of the day, that's never going to benefit us. If we're just honest about where we're at, where we are, what we need, the resources that we need are going to come to us. That's how I feel about it, because there's just so much noise out there, and there's so much like expectation put on us because we see everyone else doing it. So it's really just staying true to yourself, what you need, and moving that forward. So that being said, I think that what would be really cool, Rhiannon, is if you do take the advice and move it into a Google Doc and start kind of playing around with what you want to say. I would say throw it into the Slack channel and ask for some feedback. And I'll jump in there. I know Ashley will jump in there. I'm hoping some of you all will jump in there, and we're just going to make sure that you are shining your light as bright as it really can be.
Okay, thank you. Because yeah, I think one of the big challenges I have is that I feel really confident about what my vision is, but because it doesn't exist yet, can I speak to it? Like it has
Yeah.
to already be where like a thing before I can even say, oh, but this is what we're doing. And so this has been really, really helpful. The idea is enough.
It is. It is enough. And I'm talking about my ideas all the time, right? They don't always happen. And I wouldn't say like any of you probably are like, Kristen said this 6 months ago and this didn't happen. Like, you don't remember that. So even if you're talking about things, Rhiannon, and it's an idea and it ends up changing, like no one's actually going to be sitting there and being like, well, she said this 5 months ago. Instead, it's going to be like, wow, she did a lot of work to get there. Right. So,
If I could just add, Kristen,
yeah.
I agree 100% with everything that you've said. And Rhiannon, I can help out with that because I started really working on my project only a couple of months ago, and I see the difference that talking from the hero's journey perspective with you centered in that makes a difference with investors, especially if it's your first few times that you're meeting with this person. They really want to get a sense of who you are and the power behind you. So I think that you should be central, to what you're talking about, because you're radiating the solutions for this and you're demonstrating your power in doing so, so that they can be confident knowing that whatever the market throws at you, how many ever times you have to pivot, that you are sensitive enough to it and you have enough acumen to actually navigate that properly so that they can feel secured in supporting you. So if you want to practice with me, I'm happy to volunteer to do that, because when they leave that meeting, I think they really want to get a sense of who you are and what you can accomplish. And the product that you're pitching is secondary to that. They're aligning themselves with you and the value that you bring to the table. So learning to storytell from that hero's journey. This is where I was. This is where I'm going. These are the things that I've done. Yes, I started from the bottom up, but this can go from the top bottom too. And especially if you've researched the market from the bottom and you've actually had those intimate conversations with the people who are going to be the end users, it doesn't really matter which direction you decide to go after that, because you're prepared with all of that data, And I think when you're aligning yourself with providers and vendors in the market, they want to know that you have that close relationship with the end users, so that you can cover traction from both ends.
Thank you for that, Shauna. And you hit the nail on the head right there too. Investors care about you. At the end of the day, they will say, I invest in the founder. If you ask any kind of investor, like, what do you look for? Like, obviously a big market, obviously a way to make my money back, but like, I care about the founder. I care about their why. I care about what they're bringing to the table of this vision. One thing that is this like a huge myth, and I'm always trying to like dispel it, even to myself, right? Like, even sometimes I feel this is like, if I talk about my idea, someone's going to steal it. Like, that's something that you feel all the time. At the end of the day, no one can really steal your idea, because that idea is not going to be the same at the end when you're done with it. right? We take ideas as like a spark of something, and then all of the work that we do through customer discovery and validation and playing with our clickable prototypes and putting it in front of people, that end game is what we get to. It's not ever just the idea. And so it's more centralized of who the person is, what their expertise is, why they're solving this problem, why they're so passionate to do so, to go forward that. And I have Ashley raising her hand, and I'm hoping that she's going to say something about the hero's journey.
Yeah, it's so fun that Shauna said that. I was kind of like, wait, was she in our workshop? Because I'm a writer and have been a writer since the beginning of time. And we have our founder starter pack that is kind of just like 3 elements that all founders should have. And the second date, June 1, is about developing your founder story. And it is all about the hero's journey. And we go through we look at somebody else's founder journey and we kind of pull out the key pieces, and we understand exactly what a hero's story is meant to look like and how to provide that arc that really draws people in and shares like the obstacles you've overcome, which goes back to that idea of like just demonstrating not only do you have a good idea, but you have the authority and expertise in what you're solving. You also like have grit and you show up even when there are challenges, you overcome them, you rely on other people to help you when you need it, and you are extremely passionate and like multidimensional. So I'm really glad that Shauna brought that up, because we really believe in like centering the story of who you are to demonstrate like you're the one, you have the magic. And I put the link in the chat, and I think we have a code for you guys, for you all too. I can't.
Yeah. So I think it's VIP member
I think
or
so.
members, and it gets it for free. So it's included in the price of the beta. So if elevator pitch is something that you want to refine, if your personal founder story is something that you want to refine, or if you want to get a refresher on all of the different ways that you can fund early stage startup, those are the 3 topics that we're covering over those 3 weeks. They're going to be on Wednesdays or Thursdays from 5 to 7, starting on the 25th. So May 25th, June 1st, and then June something else. It goes after that. But yeah, so if any of you need to brush up on that, the invitation is open to you. Yeah, great conversation. What else?
I can go. Oh, sorry, maybe open that. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I feel inspired enough to be able to be vulnerable enough to talk about this. I'm like, because I kept going back to that form and I'm like, shall I, dare I? And really, then I don't know what I want to say, but I do actually, and it's very clear to me right now that I'm having a problem with flexibility and with vulnerability also for my list and for the people in the beta group. And what I'm trying to address are really, really important privacy issues for the users. And I think this is part, like after listening to this conversation, this is part of the journey, right? This is a plus. And I've been looking at it as like, I can't release the beta yet. And in this really rigid way also of like, if I don't have a beta group, I'm not going to get into the accelerator that I need if I've not successfully run the beta group. And I've reinvested in the UX for the app, and I have an app, but it's not the app that I want it to be, not even for an MVP, right? So I guess my question is, should I release that app like with a very like hardcore and clear privacy policy for beta group users just to get myself a little bit further ahead into an accelerator? Because that's how I've been thinking. Like I have to release this version, even though I've already brought a data archetype on board that's figured out how to do this in a way that will give me, I believe, will give the company and will give this app a huge unique selling point in the market right now of it being an actual safe app to use in our current like menstrual health data climate in the United States. So that was
this is so typical, Carrie. This is so typical. And we're constantly going through that all the time too. Like we're in a beta right now, right? And we were just like, we're going to do the beta. We're just going to do it. We're going to put it out there, right? So the way that I view that, Carrie, is that it's never going to be perfect. And as long as you can be doing something to move yourself forward where you're going to learn from it, that nothing can go wrong with that. Right? What's the worst that can happen? Let's talk about the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen is you've got a group of beta users, you bring them onto your product and they hate it.
Yeah.
And they go away. But I'm going to imagine that those beta users are not the only ones with periods who would like to understand their cycle, right? So I like to look at things the worst case scenarios. Of course, we don't want to curate a list and then just plop it over. So we do want to be pretty strategic and calculated on what we're doing. But at the same time, you can't hold yourself back from getting yourself out there and learning from those experiences just because you feel like you're not ready. Because ultimately, I would say, is there something internally that's holding you back from doing that, right? Is there this idea of perfectionism? Is there an idea of failure? Is there an idea of anything like catastrophic things happening? You know, like that plays into it as well. I will say, if there's a way that you can make everyone feel good about their data being secure with communication and just follow up, I think that's the best that you can do. I'll let Ashley kind of chime in too, because I feel like you may have something good to say about this, because this is like a lot of personal blockage too. Like, I deal with it. Like, I can't put it out there yet.
Yeah, I would just remember that it's not about you and people's perceptions of you. It's about your mission. And presumably you feel really connected to the work that you're doing and wanting to help your users. And so the way that we are approaching this, I mean, it's easier because so many of you know Kristen and know me. And so it's like, there's this like level of trust there, but I would be really transparent and just be like, I'm really excited to share this product and to get it out the door, and the sooner the better. And so I just wanted to be really iterative, and I really want to welcome feedback, and just remember that it's better done than perfect, and that you have something that could potentially like change people's lives. What is the around the like the data for people tracking their cycle in parts of the country where that might be used against them? Like, what can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. So the app that I initially built and that I've been using myself and has been a great tool for me for 2 years, and what I thought I could release to a beta and reinvested in and all of that, has no real, it doesn't have the level of data encryption that is needed to protect menstrual health data right now. Like, that app does not have that. So it could be like any other menstrual cycling app right now, which in our current political environment, I mean, the likelihood of something, of anyone ever actually being prosecuted on this point, and from any kind of data, certainly from my company, is very, very, very low. And I've talked to like, I mean, I've gone as far as speaking to like constitutional lawyers about this, and data privacy lawyers, and e-discovery lawyers, and all the lawyers, you know. And so I'm pretty, but it's, for me, it's about also releasing a product into the world that even has the slightest potential for that, which is kind of ridiculous, I guess, saying that out loud. But the likelihood of it is very low. But it's not something that I can say your menstrual health data is secure here. I can say I will never sell it. I could say something like, I won't turn it over if they ask me for it, but I feel like that's an invitation also. Like, you have to be really careful with those kind of things. So this is coming down to what is said in the privacy policies, and the conflict, like, that's one thing. Okay, the good news is that I have a data architect, and we've figured out a way to encrypt the data so that I can say the opposite. And that's a really big deal. And that's going to be a huge market differentiator for this app. And I'm really excited about it, but it's not developed yet. I don't have a development team on that yet. Everything's been going into this version of like a beta, an MVP, I guess, if you will. Yeah, that doesn't include that level of data architecture. And so it's not just an easy thing just to to fix that, right?
Mhm.
It's like I have one app and it's not the app I'm going to have. But maybe that's a typical situation also, and I just don't know that because this is my first time doing this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so like worst case scenario, somehow you are forced to give data, and that is like what's stopping you, right? Like somehow somebody is like harmed through your collection, their willing collection of this data. So, okay, so let's just pretend we want to protect against the worst case scenario. Could you just source people who are in states where that would never happen, like California or New York City or Colorado, for your beta test?
I've looked at geofencing, yes. I've looked at geofencing for the beta. What I believe is needed for this beta group to launch it is a privacy policy that is clear and that addresses this in a way that the that the beta group users understand. And part of this, it's like this. I can scrub daily, like all user information, right? This app is not even built to track periods. It's built to integrate with your calendar to project forward a hormonal cycle that is at this point in time non-clinical as well, right? So, but like I said, the likelihood of something going down is very low, and I need a way to communicate all of those things.
Where does this pushback come from? Is it talking with those that are on your beta list where they're asking you these questions and they're not feeling comfortable with your answer? Like, are you actually hearing that from people? Like, tell us where this information is coming from.
Well, it's mostly coming from me. It's like it's a core value of mine, this thing.
Yeah.
And this is where the kind of activism and what I'm doing also comes in, and just, yeah, a lot of it's coming from me. A lot of it's lawyers in my head as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of it is just like a personal block to prevent you from succeeding and shining brightly.
I mean, there's probably a little bit of that mixed in, but I really do want to release the beta. I always say, like, I want to move the needle just a little bit. I want to release this beta. I've even got someone now to like completely manage the beta group, like,
oh wow.
And things might just click into place with this beta group. I've got to figure out how to communicate this clearly to the beta users. Oh, that's what I was going for. Part of it is not even like the risk from me, but like a risk that a user puts on themselves in terms of like, if you integrate it with your phone calendar, then that data is on a different server somewhere. Like, that's out of our hands, right? So depending on the integration that you're using, and that's kind of a key function and will always remain a key function of the app as well.
So let's talk about the goals of a beta, and Shauna put something in here too. So the goal of a beta is to test the market and make sure that people need your product, want your product, will pay for your product, right? And you need to learn from the market. So I think just the fact of putting it out there with clear language around privacy and that it's a beta, that these other things are coming, I would let them self-select themselves in. And that's going to tell you how important that is, right? If you put that out and no one signs up, then you know that's super important and that you're not going to be able to put the app out until you get the encryption in. If you do get people on there, then you've got people on there that you can interact with and start getting their feedback of it. And then my other question was too, if you are feeling like you do need to have the encryption, like let's say the market tells you that, or you make the decision to do that, is there anything else that you can be doing with that community, with that beta group, to bring them together to provide value that keeps them engaged until you do have the encryption ready? And Rhiannon said, I wouldn't mind the privacy gap now. Some feedback.
Yeah, well, two things. Yeah, Rhiannon's not the first one. I have other people who have told me the same thing. Like, I understand the risk. I track with my Fitbit or my Apple Watch. Like, a lot of people understand that this is just a thing right now. So, but thank you for that, Rhiannon. That's always interesting to hear for sure. you know, me too, right? Like I'm just kind of reckless with my own data. But that is a very interesting question about how to interact with the beta group outside of giving them the app. And I have been thinking about that. Like maybe I just simplify this thing and I turn the beta group into something else that's gonna, because I'm sure that like most people in the beta group, well, I don't know though. A lot of people have signed up for the beta group that have never even thought about using an app like that. And I'm the first person they're speaking to that's telling them about this. And they're like, oh, I need that. So I've got a lot of people that have signed up for that. I'll have to think on that. But yes, I'm sure that there's some other way to use it. The part where the block is coming in and my typical behavior of like, if I don't know what to say or do, I avoid it. And I'm avoiding the list, and that's not good because it's growing daily, right? And that's an exciting thing. And I'm just like not communicating about it. So what was written in the chat, I think Ashley wrote it, about communicating the goals you're setting and how you're meeting them at the same pace you set them. I'm going to concentrate on that a little bit as well, because yeah.
Yeah. And also, are you open for feedback?
Yes, please. Yeah.
What I'm hearing is something that I do myself is I will be like, they don't need that. They're not going to do that. No one's going to do that. And I self-select it for them, which is kind of what you're doing. You're like, I'm like, well, who's told you that? Well, no, it's kind of me. Oh, well, other people have said exactly what Rhiannon's saying, which is like, I'll do it without the privacy concern. So even though you're hearing that people are willing to do it, you're still saying, I can't do it because you're self-selecting for them. So if you've got a list, it's actively growing, I would be very straightforward. Communication's key. The more transparent you can be about anything, the better in my mind. And then that will allow you to see who's really going to be there for your beta, right? And then you'll also see like how important that encryption is too. Because then let's say 30% of your list goes into the beta without the concerns of privacy. That just gives you an opportunity to go back to the other percent and say, hey, we got the encryption ready. Let's get you on board for the next round of beta testing. So, but I wouldn't try not to avoid that. Try not to avoid the list because people will forget that they're on it and you want to try to keep them engaged. So even if it's information that you can send them or resources or like this is coming soon, I would try to do what you can.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's ultimately going to result in your traction, which is ultimately going to help you secure funding and, being able to move forward.
Thank you so much. Very
Thank
helpful.
you for feeling vulnerable enough to ask that question, because I think it's very common. You're not alone. And I do it all the time, personally. It's super avoider.
I mean, that's why you're here, right? So that we can like cheer you on and tell you that you can do it and support you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've got 8 minutes left. Any other things, questions, anyone want to talk about? Everyone's like, I'm going to turn off my video. I'm done.
Yeah, right.
So if there aren't any other questions, Tamara, are you coming back on or just because I said videos are off?
You shamed me.
Oh, no shame. No shame. So again, for these hot seat coaching calls, if you have something specific, just use the form. And then if we have time, like we did today, where we can take Carrie's questions, we can work through it. But I hope that everyone kind of heard something that resonates with them, that is applicable to what stage that you are at. And I just want to continue to say that this is a space that you can come to, and it doesn't matter what you want to talk about. Nothing's off the table. And we are here to support you and boost you up. And if you're having a pretty shitty day, let us know and we will boost you up, right? That happens a lot too.
I came up with a question.
Okay, let's go.
So I am planning my MVP launch, and I'm only now learning about like market analysis SEO, traction, like how to monitor, clicks and all that stuff. And I just wanted to get a sense of how everyone else is doing with that in terms of like measuring their users and their activities, and if there are any tools that you've come across that really help and navigate this well, or any pitfalls that you might be willing to share with the group. Okay, so you're all page with me, completely lost and inundated with all of these resources.
Yeah. So let's talk about your goals, Shauna. What are some things that you want to learn from getting your product out to market?
So I have a fairly complex end goal for my product. I'm stripping it down to bare bones features, and I just want to get a sense of if I'm correct in the specific feature set that I'm going to launch as a first phase MVP. And so I'll be announcing, once I get the landing page and all that stuff set up, I'll be announcing in different communities, different messaging surrounding the same end goal, and testing how that messaging is landing, testing how people are responding to the way that the problem is positioned. And whether I'm getting clicks, whether I'm getting actual signups and that kind of traction, so that when I have my beta users, which I'm hoping to be at least 100, I understand the way that I need to be communicating this to what would potentially be my first adopters.
Yeah, I would say that for any kind of testing phase, it's going to be unique to what you really want to learn. And you have to try to identify what those KPIs are. So those key performance indicators. So if it's clicks, if it's visiting a website, if it's signing up for the beta test, if it's actually downloading something, if it's how they interact with things, just kind of setting all those things up front of what you will need to see in order to feel validated of what you built is going to work in the market. It's going to be unique to what you're really trying to drive forward. So there are a lot of tools out there. I haven't used any in recent times that really tracks a lot of user behavior, but I would just do, some Google searches and talk with some other founders too on any kind of tools that they have been using lately. Earlier on, I would say when I'm putting a product into market, what I'm looking for is how people are interacting with it, how quickly they're converting, is it solving all of their problems? And so I'll typically do a lot of like one-on-one conversations to figure that out too, because early on, the data is great, but it's the real conversations that you can have. And so if you can position yourself where you're asking questions that aren't leading and asking similar to customer discovery, what's their experience with the beta? Is it solving their problem? Are there any key things missing? If you can wave your magic wand, what would be the next feature that I push out? Having conversations like that, I feel like are a little bit more beneficial on an earlier stage than understanding where people are like hotspots, right? Like one thing that you can do is there's an overlay on an app and you can see how long someone's mouse is over a particular area, like hotspots and stuff like that. That's really important when you're into UI, UX, and you're really trying to make it like a kick-ass seamless experience. But at MVP early stage validation, you just want to know that people are going to pay for your product, like at the end of the day. So what can you do to understand that the product is needed, you can get people signed on, it's an easy process, and they would pay for your solution? That's what I would stick to early on. Figure that out. And then as you build the product, as you add more features, as you really nail down the UI UX, that's when I would really kind of use those tools to understand how people are interacting with it. But again, every product's different and it depends on what your goals are. But I would say, like, end of the day, how are you going to make revenue? And how are you going to have people on your platform? That's the only thing that investors really look at, is what have you been able to do in regards to having a product out in market, having customers, and having revenue. Those are the three big things. So when you're looking at it, how can I get there? And how can I use this beta test to know whether or not I need to pivot, make changes, or I'm on the right track?
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, that gives us 2 minutes. And I don't think that's enough for any questions.
Shauna,
So
Rhiannon put on Rhiannon. Sorry, there's characters in my book that are named your name, and I've been pronouncing it wrong in my head. She put in full story in the platform, sorry, in the chat.
Yeah, I did see that. Thank you, Rhiannon. And I did see that bit.ly link, so I'll look into that as well. Thank you.
That's pretty, like, I mean, if you're just like putting out different messaging and testing, like who's clicking and downloading, that's like a really simple way to do it, super low cost. We do that. But we also aren't reaching 100 people, so I don't know if that's going to give you the capability and insights that you need.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah. And let us know. Can you report back?
I definitely will. Yeah, because there's
Thank
got to be like a packaged, managed way of, navigating that whole ecosystem. So I'll
Yeah.
I'll follow up with you.
Okay, thank you.
sounds good. All right. Thank you everyone for your time today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And yeah, so
Thank
happy
you.
to have you all here. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.